When we think about Arthurian legend, it's sometimes hard to picture the other noble and fearsome characters outside of Arthur and Merlin. This is likely because of how much the two characters dominate the pages of Le Morte d'Arthur, perhaps the most comprehensive compendium of Arthurian legend by Sir Thomas Malory. As we've seen thus far, Arthur is abundantly celebrated by both his peers and the commoners in which he rules over, and whilst we learn of other courageous knights like Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias, we seldom see them steal the spotlight, or at least step out of the yawning shadow that Arthur casts as their king. Perhaps you might say that this is a testament to how great a king Arthur was, that there simply was no man better than him, and no man who could stand beside him and be considered his equal. However, in the ensuing battle between Arthur and the kings who had disputed his rule, it is Arthur's knights who shine in the thick of the bloody battle, as they not only slay many knights in their service, but also save Arthur's life on a number of occasions. Furthermore, we also see the introduction of two memorable brothers, a duo who are astonishing on the battlefield, two kings who Arthur could certainly not have done without. Their names were Ban and Bors. After Arthur is convinced by Merlin to let King Lot and the other kings escape, he returns to London, where he calls a meeting with his barons, in determining a solution for when those very kings came calling once more. But the barons prove to be pretty useless, and don't have much of a suggestion to offer. In fact, they prove to be quite arrogant, and merely assume that they have the numbers advantage, and could not be toppled, even if the rogue kings tried. Arthur isn't so sure about this though. Perhaps it is his gut feeling, or maybe because he is still young enough and new enough to the life as king to be blinded by such conceitedness. So instead of blindly following the advice of his barons, Arthur plays the Merlin card and summons the Grand Wizard to come and give him counsel. Merlin arrives and brings a dire warning to Arthur and the barons. He tells them that the rogue kings have gone and acquired 4 more kings to join them, and that with them they are now bolstered by a massive host of well-trained knights. He warns them that if they were to fight now, Arthur would be easily overcome. In typical Merlin fashion, Merlin already has all the answers, and advises Arthur that beyond the sea there are 2 fierce brothers, both of who are kings and are of tremendous power. One of them is King Ban of Benwick, and the other is King Bors of Gaul. Merlin continues that the 2 brothers are in a heated war with the King Claudius, but King Claudius appears to have at his disposal a substantial host of high-quality knights, those that both King Ban and Bors are having trouble dispatching. Merlin tells Arthur to send to the brothers 2 of his most trusted knights to offer an alliance, whereby Arthur will promise to defeat the King Claudius if the brothers help him defeat the rogue kings. As if Merlin's will was God's will, it was agreed upon unanimously, but also because none of them seemed to have an alternative idea. We see a trend set, in that for all of Arthur's brilliance and the wise barons and councilmen in his employ, none of them are really any good at problem solving. It's not an exaggeration to say that Arthur really does utilise Merlin like he's Blue-Eyed White Dragon, the very answer to all his problems, and to be honest, he isn't wrong. Though it does call into question Arthur's ability to rule, in that someone else is constantly providing him with all the answers. You might say, why doesn't Merlin just rule the bloody kingdom then? Arthur sends Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias to visit the kings Ban and Bors at the city of Benwick, but on their way they are pounced upon by 8 knights of Sir Claudius. Ulfius and Brastias try to reason with the 8 knights, but they aren't exactly the reasonable type, and 2 by 2 they rush the messengers. You might wonder why the 8 knights didn't just attack Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias altogether, but maybe Malory thought this would have been too unrealistic, and also may have made Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias too heroic, and perhaps too much like Arthur. So the knights attack in twos, making the fight fair, perhaps a nod to their honour as knights, but in any case are quickly defeated by the valour and skill of Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias. Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias continue to Benwick, and after having passed Arthur's royal letters to the messengers there, they await Ban and Bors' response. After understanding the letters, we are told that Ban and Bors are very welcoming towards Ulfius and Brastias, and agree to Arthur's terms, in that they will aid him defeat the rogue kings in exchange for Arthur's help in defeating King Claudas. They also treat Ulfius and Brastias to a feast and bid them to stay as long as they like. When Sir Ulfius and Sir Brastias return to deliver the good news, Arthur is in great spirits and throws a feast and great tournament in celebration of his new allies. Ban and Bors eventually join the celebration along with their knights and appear to hit it off with Arthur, where they, Sir Ector, and the Archbishop of Canterbury oversee the great tournament as judges of the best fighter. So instead of actually discussing battle plans, preparing their armies, or setting off to march against the rogue kings, they choose to sit back and play London's Got Talent as they judge the best jouster. You'll notice that Merlin isn't about in this part of the story for some reason, but I bet if he was, he'd have them scrambling about for their swords instead of conducting this blatant dick measuring contest and wasting precious time. Interestingly, this jousting tournament proves to be quite an irresponsible move, given that some of the knights, those that were healthy and battle ready, actually end up getting injured. In fact, the jousting actually turns a lot of the knights who were meant to be on the same side against each other, as rivalries between Arthur's men and Ban and Bors' men simmers in each competition. The tournament might have been thrown with good intentions as a form of friendly competition and entertainment in a time where everyone was anxious, but the results do not mitigate the outcome, which may have dampened morale. I know I'm sounding like a party pooper here, but I know Merlin wouldn't have tolerated this tomfoolery. It isn't until the next morning after, having prayed and had breakfast, do the kings sit down to discuss what they're going to do. It is understood that Merlin, probably on his own accord, will go to King Ban and Bors' lands with a ring, which identifies him as acting commander in their absence, and here Merlin serves as a conduit for the kings, exercising their power and establishing himself as a temporary figurehead whilst they are away. Whilst here, he takes 10,000 horsemen and secretly sneaks them into the forest of Bedegrain, where he has them lie in wait. Again, we see here the cunning of Merlin, in that he is always thinking 2 steps ahead, and appears to organise and lead men in a far more effective way than the kings do. It is once more down to Merlin's meticulous planning and shrewd strategy that puts Arthur at a huge advantage over his enemies. When Merlin returns to Arthur, he tells him of how he has sequestered the force of 10,000 horsemen in the forest, and that they will join the fray when and if needed. Not only are the kings impressed with Merlin's battle tactics, but also that he appeared to have put this all in place whilst Arthur, Ban and Bors stood around flexing their biceps at each other. We are told then that Arthur, Ban and Bors ride for battle, only to learn that the rogue kings have bolstered their ranks even more. There are now 11 individual kings who wish to dethrone Arthur, and each of these kings brings with them a mighty army of well-trained and well-disciplined knights. We also get to see a bit of a perspective switch, and get to learn a bit more about the mentality of these rogue kings, who swear an oath to each other that none of them will surrender until Arthur has been destroyed. Each king is also identified in this passage, which includes King Brandegoris of Srangor, who brings 5,000 men, King Clariance of Northumberland, who brings 3,000 men, the king known as the King of 100 Knights, who brings 4,000 men, the dastardly King Lot, who brings 5,000 men, King Uriens, who brings 6,000 men, King Idris of Cornwall, who brings another 5,000 men, King Agwisance of Ireland, who brings yet another 5,000 men, and King Nentries, who also brings 5,000 men. There is also the Duke of Canban, who brings, another 5,000 men. And whilst he is only a duke, he appears to be named as one of these 11 kings. The text tells us that these men were soon ready for battle and mounted upon horse. They sent forth their 4 riders and began to lay siege to the castle of Bedegrain, which they knew belonged to Arthur. The 4 riders who were sent out by the 11 kings, however, are intercepted by the 4 riders of Arthur, Ban and Bors, and they are interrogated for the location of the king's camp. Meanwhile, the king with the 100 knights is shown to have a dream 2 nights before their forces collide with Arthur's, and the dream contains images of a great wind that destroyed their castles and towns, and that afterwards, a flood ruins whatever is left over. The king with the 100 knights reveals this dream to the other kings, but they see this dream as an omen of a great battle, and one that would turn in their favour. Now, I don't know how anyone would interpret a dream where their own city was destroyed by a wind, and any survivors are drowned by a flood as a sign of triumph, but I guess you could at least say the 11 kings were an optimistic bunch, if not maybe a little quixotic. Having obtained the location of the 7 kings, Merlin tells Arthur to ride upon them. Again, Merlin takes initiative here and understands that the best time to strike is when the 11 kings are completely unaware. Notice how Merlin seeks to leave his enemy with absolutely no means to offer up a counterattack. Merlin truly does demonstrate some moments of true bloodthirstiness, something that is only facilitated by Arthur, who appears to do everything that Merlin tells him. We are told that Arthur and his army hit the camp of the 11 kings so hard that their pavilions are turned over on their heads. However, the 11 kings are not so helpless, and despite losing 10,000 men in this altercation, they are said to give Arthur a good fight, as they scramble for their weapons, armour and horses. As the battle raged on, Merlin intervenes yet again, and says unto King Arthur that King Ban and Bors with their men should hide in the forests, and that they should wait there until Arthur has exhausted his men in battle. Through this, the 11 kings would surely overestimate themselves, and assume the battle is won, whereby they would be taken unawares by the fresh forces of Ban and Bors, and ultimately vanquished in their assault. This was agreed to be an exceptionally good tactic, given that Arthur's forces would appear to be dwarfed by the 11 kings, and that it would surely make them overconfident in the battle. Through this, we yet again see Merlin's meddling as a factor which puts Arthur in a better position. We also see that Merlin is not afraid to play chess with people's lives, even Arthur's. Although while some may say this isn't the case, because Merlin believes nothing bad will happen to Arthur, for he is chosen by God, others believe that Merlin probably had a plan B up his sleeve, should Arthur fall in battle. He puts Arthur in considerable danger by making him fight against the 11 kings, whilst Ban and Bors wait for a sneak attack, for during this window, Arthur is flooded by a tremendous press of powerful knights. We are told that once the 11 kings were organised and beheld Arthur's meagre army, they were ashamed, but it didn't stop them from coming at him in full force. It shows again that these kings did indeed retain some honour, and that they felt bad about rushing Arthur when he had so few to defend with, but it also shows their more ambitious and devilish sides, in that they decide to go ahead with the attack anyway. We see Arthur's knights from Sir Ulfius, Sir Brastias, Sir Kay and many others perform valiant deeds in battle, as they smote other knights and even dehorsed many of the 11 kings. One of the issues I take with Mallory's telling of this battle, and many following battles, is the repetitiveness of each confrontation. We don't even really get to see a description of much bloodshed, but Mallory seems to focus on this sort of Grand Theft Auto style of fighting, where the knights seem to be keen on jacking each other's horses and doing more jousting than killing. Whilst it's specified frequently throughout the text that thousands of men are slain, we are frequented to this chain of knights fumbling in the fray, hijacking each other's mounts and passing them off to each other. In one part, we see Arthur become absolutely enraged when he sees someone steal Sir Ector's horse, which prompts him to attack the perp and kill the horse in the process. Much of the battle, which goes on for about 4 pages, is mostly knights slaying each other's horses, where Mallory keeps a disorderly scorecard of who's knocked over who. Funnily enough, none of the named characters seem to die, despite being repeatedly flung from their horses. It's possible that this horsing around is some kind of battle in itself, whereby being dislodged from one's saddle and having their mount taken is the ultimate dishonour. By doing this to each other on the battlefield, it's implied that the victim suffers great shame at having lost their horse, something which is almost comparable to death. You might link it to being demanned in a fight, almost as if being dismounted, the knights suffer some sort of psychological onslaught, which not only renders them lesser than what they were before, but also severely weakens them in both mind and body. To be dismounted would obviously be pretty painful, and could cause serious or even fatal injury. But in this battle, it seems to be more than that, as if to be removed from one's horse is to be removed of their status as men. In video games, this would be the equivalent of 360 no-scoping someone and then teabagging their corpse. But in any case, the battle is filled with knights running about and stealing each other's horses, or passing them on to their friends who had already lost their horses, as if this was some sort of cure for their embarrassment. At some point during the Great Battle, King Lot realises that despite Arthur's meagre force, they're still getting pretty banged up. He takes the King with the 100 Knights, King Agwisance, King Idris, and the Duke of Cabinet, and declares that they, with 15,000 men, will fall back, and if the other kings can't defeat Arthur, then they will swoop in and finish him off with a much fiercer charge, having rested. Basically, he decides to camp, and sits pretty for the meantime, as he waits to cash in his money in the bank. But King Lot gets a rude awakening when suddenly King Ban and Bors join the fray, and go about knocking people off their horses, and passing them around as if they were trading cards. Oh, and killing people. They start killing people too. When King Lot sees this going on, he absolutely bricks it. He even starts praying to Jesus for help, because King Bors goes berserk and starts spilling blood like it was going out of style. There's even a comical line where the King with the 100 Knights asks, "What is he?" For he is so compelled by the killing machine that is King Bors of Gaul. King Lot immediately assumes that this is Merlin's doing, but is partly mollified when King Carados offers to fight King Bors, providing the other kings come to help should he start to lose. They agree, but there certainly is some doubt in the air. King Carados and his men approach King Bors with caution, and when they do, King Bors chews through them as if he were a machine. He even cheekily knocks King Carados off his horse, and what was left of King Carados' forces declared that he was a toxic player and should be banned from the field. As promised though, the King with the 100 Knights comes to King Carados' rescue with a fresh force of arms, but he did not count on King Ban speeding onto the scene with the same prowess as a hungry lion. King Bors then begins to taunt the other kings, who are now treading their feet, saying, "Such two brethren as is King Ban and King Bors are not living, wherefore we must needs void or die, and but if we avoid manly and wisely, there is but death." And this basically means that there is no one like him and his brother, and that together they would rather die than not fight. In this, despite still being outnumbered, they demonstrate that they are unwilling to retreat and will fight until their final breath. They show equal valour that we would expect from Arthur, and in this, we can see the virtues of what true kings look like, those that, unlike the 11 kings, fight with far more honour and conviction. It then becomes King Ban's time to shine as he destroys the enemy knights, an act that causes King Lot to actually start crying. We are also told that many of the 11 kings' men flee from the battle in the wake of Ban and Bors' destructive emergence, something which is regarded with the utmost contempt in the eyes of both Mallory and the 11 kings. King Ban actually dukes it out with the King with the 100 Knights, and during this fray, they kill many of each other's men, before King Ban casts the King with the 100 Knights to the earth. Arthur then trudges his way back onto the battlefield and is astonished to find King Ban standing amongst a sea of dead bodies. With this, he immediately proceeds to find the nearest enemy and, yep, you guessed it, pulls him off his horse and gives the horse to King Ban. They exchange a few words of encouragement to each other and then get back to the killing. Eventually, we learn that the 11 kings and their forces come to a complete stalemate with Arthur's, whereby neither side can blame the other for such resilience, because both sides are desperate to win. Here we see both sides pay some respect to the other, in that they each recognise what they are fighting for, how skillful each man is, and how much prowess each possesses. King Ban even declares, "They are the best fighting men, and knights of most prowess, that ever I saw or heard speak of, and those 11 kings are men of great worship." The 11 kings meanwhile prepare a final assault, and it is King Lot who makes the other kings swear that should they see any man fleeing from the battle, they should kill them, regardless of who they are, for it is better to slay a coward than to be slain because of a coward. The sides commit to the final charge at each other, with Arthur, Ban and Bors in the thick of the press, leading their knights into the storm of the oncoming enemy. Whilst they are unable to slay any of the 11 kings, they do draw them back over the river, and it is understood that through this desperate assault, the forces of Arthur, Ban and Bors tip the battle in their favour, if only a slight. Whilst they deem to be victorious, it is certainly a Pyrrhic victory, given that so much life was lost and the 11 kings still remain at large. You might be wondering why Arthur didn't press the attack on the 11 kings, given that they were pushed into retreat and that they had them on the ropes. But I'm sure you can guess that this was because everyone's favourite micromanager had other plans instead. Indeed, Merlin appears on a great black stallion and proceeds to berate Arthur, asking him, has he not spilled enough blood, and that has he not lost enough lives in this war? He tells him that because of this carnage, God is angry with him, and that if he chases down the 11 kings, he will regret it. He commands Arthur to return to his lodging and rest, because the battle is over, even though it really isn't, given that all the kings survived, and that the spoils of the battlefield should be given over to his men and to the men of Ban and Bors for their participation. Now, as you can imagine, I have a lot to say about this, particularly the hypocrisy of Merlin. This is a man who told Arthur in the very beginning to obliterate the 11 kings, to show them no mercy after having called him a witch and a dream reader, only to now backtrack and condemn Arthur for acting in the very same way he had told him to. Perhaps Merlin saw something that made him realise that pursuing the kings now would only bring a less desirable outcome, and that the only way to stop Arthur from going after them was to take the wind out of his sails by berating him. Or perhaps Merlin realised the gravity of the situation, in that so many lives were lost, and that even he feels a little bad about this, perhaps even responsible. But far be it from the Grand Wizard to admit being wrong, and so he proceeds to pin it all on Arthur, vindicating himself of ever having been involved. It also serves Merlin in that it portrays Arthur as a fearsome and ruthless king, for what was once a boy in the many eyes of the people, including the 11 kings, is now a butcherer of mass proportions, one who is so powerful he even incurs the anger of God, according to Merlin. It's possible also that Merlin doesn't want Arthur to bloody his hands any more than he needs to, for he also reveals that the 11 kings, unbeknownst to them, have had their regions raided by attackers, and are now returning to a ruined state. In this, Merlin shows sympathy for his enemies, and seeks to teach Arthur about mercy by allowing the kings to live, for they have nothing to return to anyway. It could also be that darker side of Merlin that we've spoken about, in that he finally has his revenge for being insulted by King Lot and the other kings, for they now have to behold their own kingdoms ravaged and destroyed, something that will kill them on the inside. After all the knights are paid, and Ban and Bors are satisfied with the loot they have acquired, Merlin takes his leave and goes to see a man named Blyce, who we are told is Merlin's master, an elusive figure who lives in Northumberland. Here Merlin asks Blyce to write the account of Arthur's battle, as well as all future battles. Weeks go by and Arthur is in the castle of Bedegraine when a man in black sheepskin, a great pair of boots, a russet gown and wielding a bow and arrow brings geese as a gift to Arthur. Arthur has no idea who the bloke is, and after accepting the gift, the man proceeds to overstep his mark and asks Arthur for a gift in return. When Arthur challenges him for this, the man reveals himself to be, just Merlin being a dick as usual. Why he chooses now of all times to play this prank on Arthur is not known, but Arthur receives it in good spirits and appears to welcome the wizard back into his employ. We are also introduced here to a damsel known as Leonors, the daughter of the Earl of Sanham. When Arthur sees her, he becomes besotted with her, and because he's the king and can pretty much do whatever he wants, he follows in his father's footsteps and takes the woman to bed immediately. In this tiny passage, we see Arthur transition entirely from boy to man, for not only has he won his first war, but he has also now lost his virginity. Whilst not necessarily celebrated the same way his victory over the 11 kings is, it is still crucial to his development, as we leave behind any notion of the mere boy who was carrying around his brother's swords as nothing but a squire, and now behold him as a man, if not the man. We also see Arthur become a father, as Leonors gives birth to a son named Bor. But the peaceful period is quickly overturned when there comes word that the King Rience of North Wales has waged war on the King Lear de Grance of Cameliard, an act that rubs Arthur up the wrong way, for he was close allies with King Lear de Grance and happened to hate King Rience. Mallory tells us that the reason for this is because the King Rience was always against Arthur, but he doesn't elaborate on this here. Arthur lends a part of his forces to Ban and Bors in their war against King Claudas as promised, but interestingly, King Ban and Bors themselves stay with Arthur and decide to assist him in his decision to march to the rescue of King Lear de Grance. But that's the story for the next video, as we continue in our quest to plough through Thomas Mallory's Le Morte d'Arthur. Hopefully you're enjoying this series as much as I am reading it, and with any luck, we might soon very well be done with the first book of Mallory's super long compendium. As always guys, don't forget to give this video a thumbs up and hit the subscribe button for more content just like this. Until the next time.